The mud squelched beneath Catherine's knees as she arranged the last of her wildflowers in mismatched glass jars, trying to ignore the way her black morning dress was already caked halfway to her waist in the thick brown sludge that had become the main street of Camp Verde, Arizona territory. Rain had fallen for 3 straight days in the spring of 1883, turning the small settlement into a maze of mud-slicked paths where wagon wheels stuck and horses struggled. But Catherine Ashford needed the money too desperately to let a little weather keep her from her post outside the general store. The flowers were the only beautiful thing she had left to sell. Everything else, the small ranch her husband Thomas had worked himself to death trying to maintain, the cattle that had succumbed to disease one winter, the furniture they had shipped all the way from Missouri when they were young and foolish and believed that Arizona would be their promised land, all of it was gone now. Sold piece by piece over the 2 years, since Thomas had been thrown from a spooked horse and broken his neck, leaving her a widow at 24 with nothing but debts, and the stubborn refusal to give up that had brought her family west in the first place. She was 26 now, and the flowers were all she had. Every morning before dawn, she walked 3 miles to the canyon where they grew wild among the red rocks, columbines and Indian paintbrush, and delicate purple asters that somehow thrived despite the harsh desert climate. She picked them carefully, leaving enough to grow back, and brought them to town in an old wooden crate, selling them for whatever coins the miners and cattlemen and their wives could spare. Most days, she made enough for beans and cornmeal. On good days, there might be a bit of dried meat. She had learned to ignore the pitying looks from the other women, the ones whose husbands were still alive, who whispered about her behind their gloved hands as they passed. She had learned to smile politely at the men who sometimes made offers that had nothing to do with flowers, proposals that would have put a roof over her head, but would have cost her the only thing she had left that Thomas had given her, her dignity. 2 cents for the red ones, Mrs. Patterson said, stopping with her parasol held high though the rain had finally stopped that morning. She was the banker's wife, plump and prosperous, and she never paid a penny more than she had to for anything. 5 cents, same as always, Catherine replied quietly, not looking up from arranging the jars. The mud made it difficult to keep them upright, and she had already lost one to a passing cowboy's careless boot that morning. Highway robbery for weeds, Mrs. Patterson sniffed, but she dropped 5 copper coins into Catherine's palm and took the jar of scarlet paintbrush anyway. It was the same conversation they had every week. Catherine had just tucked the coins into the small leather pouch she kept tied at her waist when she heard the horse approaching. She knew the sound of every regular's mount by now, knew Mr. Henderson's limping mare and the doctor's steady gelding, and the way the Pattersons' carriage horses moved in perfect matched time. This horse was different, moving with a confident, ground-eating stride that suggested a well-trained animal and a rider who knew how to sit a saddle. She looked up and had to shade her eyes against the sudden appearance of sunlight breaking through the clouds. The rider was tall, broad-shouldered, and silhouetted against the bright sky in a way that made it hard to make out details at first. Then he drew closer, and she could see he was young, perhaps 30 or so, with dark hair that needed cutting and several days' worth of beard shadowing a strong jaw. His clothes marked him as a working cowboy, worn denim and leather chaps still damp from the rain, but his saddle was good quality, and the bay horse beneath him was one of the finest she had seen in months. He reined in directly in front of her, and the horse, well trained indeed, stood perfectly still despite the uncertain footing in the mud. The cowboy looked down at her for a long moment, and Catherine felt suddenly acutely aware of how she must appear, kneeling in the mud in her faded morning dress with her hair coming loose from its pins. "Madam," he said, and his voice was deep and soft, with an accent that suggested Texas or maybe Oklahoma. "Those flowers for sale?" "Yes, sir," Catherine replied, struggling to her feet. Her knees protested, stiff from kneeling, and she had to grab the edge of the general store's porch railing to steady herself. The mud sucked at her boots as she moved. 5 cents a jar, or 3 for 12 cents. He dismounted in one smooth motion, dropping the reins. The bay didn't move an inch, ground tied as easily as if it had been roped to a post. Up close, the cowboy was even taller than she had thought, and she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. They were dark brown, almost black, and there was something in them that made her breath catch, a kind of focused intensity that suggested this was a man who made up his mind about things and stuck to his decisions. "I will take them all," he said simply. Catherine blinked. "I'm sorry." "All of them." He gestured at the remaining jars, at least 15 of them arrayed in the mud around her. "However much that costs, I will pay it." That would be, well, let me see. Catherine's mind went blank for a moment, thrown by the unexpected windfall. 75 cents for all of them. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a leather wallet. And for a moment Catherine's heart sank, thinking he was about to reveal himself as one of those men, the kind who thought buying her flowers entitled him to buy her as well. But he simply counted out the coins, real silver dollars, not copper pennies, and placed them in her palm, carefully avoiding touching her skin in a way that suggested he understood propriety. "You gave me too much," Catherine said quickly, looking down at the 3 silver dollars gleaming in her muddy hand. "It's only 75 cents, this is $3. Keep it," he said. "A man should pay fair value for what he wants." "But sir, I cannot accept," she began, trying to hand back the excess. But he had already turned to gather up the jars, tucking them carefully into his saddlebags with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his rough appearance. "My name is Nathan Pierce," he said, settling the last jar and turning back to face her. "I have been working the cattle drives between Texas and the Northern Territories for the past 12 years, and I have just taken a position as foreman at the Running Creek Ranch, about 8 miles north of here. I am 29 years old, I own my horse and tack free and clear. I have saved most of my wages over the years, and I do not drink to excess, gamble, or frequent the kind of establishments that a decent woman would disapprove of." Catherine stared at him, completely bewildered by this sudden recitation of his credentials. "That's very nice, Mr. Pierce, but I do not understand why you are telling me this." "Because I would like to call on you," Nathan said, and there was something almost vulnerable in his direct gaze now, something that suggested this speech had cost him some courage to make. "If you are not already spoken for. I have seen you here, selling your flowers every week for the past 2 months since I arrived in Camp Verde. I have watched you turn down propositions from men who had no right to ask, and I have seen you maintain your dignity in circumstances that would have broken a lesser woman. I think you are the kind of woman a man could build a life with if you would give him the chance." The world seemed to have tilted slightly on its axis. Catherine opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Mr. Pierce, we have never even spoken before today." "I know," he acknowledged. "That is why I am asking to call on you proper-like, so we can speak. So you can get to know me, and I can get to know you, and we can see if what I suspect might be possible actually is." "And what is it you suspect?" The question came out barely above a whisper. "That you are exactly what I have been looking for my whole life," Nathan said with such straightforward honesty that Catherine felt heat rise to her cheeks. "And that maybe, just maybe, I might be what you need too, a partner, someone to help shoulder the burdens, someone who sees your strength and values it. Catherine's hand went unconsciously to the thin gold band she still wore on her left hand, Thomas's ring. She had not thought about taking it off, had not thought about there being a life after widowhood that involved anything but survival. The idea that this stranger, this cowboy who bought all her flowers and spoke to her like she was something precious rather than something to be pitied, could be offering her a different path, was so unexpected that she did not know how to process it. "I was married," she said, needing him to understand. "My husband died 2 years ago." "I know," Nathan said gently. "The whole town knows the story of the widow who sells flowers. I am not asking you to forget him or to pretend he never existed. I am just asking you to consider that there might be room in your life for something new. If not now, then someday. And I am a patient man." "I do not even know you," Catherine protested, but there was less conviction in her voice now. "Then let me court you proper," Nathan said. "Let me take you to the church social next week. Let me call on you at your home, wherever that is. Let me prove to you that I am serious about this, that I am not some drifter looking for a convenience but a man looking for a wife." The word wife hung in the air between them, shocking in its directness. Catherine had thought that part of her life was over, had resigned herself to scraping by alone until she was too old or too worn down to continue. The possibility that she might be wrong, that there might be another chance at the partnership she had lost when Thomas died, was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. "I live in a room behind the boarding house," she heard herself say. "Mrs. Chen rents it to me cheap in exchange for helping with the washing. It is not much." "I did not expect it would be," Nathan said, and there was no judgment in his voice, only understanding. "May I call on you there tomorrow evening? We could take a walk if the weather holds. Talk somewhere that is not the middle of a muddy street." Catherine looked at him, really looked at him, trying to see past the surface to the man beneath. He met her gaze steadily, no artifice, no hidden agenda that she could detect. Just a man who had apparently decided she was what he wanted and was willing to state it plainly. It was the plainness of it, the honesty, that decided her. She was so tired of the veiled offers, the pitying looks, the sense that everyone in Camp Verde saw her as a problem to be solved or a victim to be rescued. Nathan Pierce looked at her like she was a woman worth courting, worth the effort of flowers and formal calls and patient persistence. "7 o'clock," she said, "but I cannot promise anything beyond a walk and a conversation." The smile that broke across Nathan's face was like the sun coming out from behind clouds, transforming his whole countenance. "That is all I am asking for right now. A chance." He swung back up into his saddle with easy grace, settling his weight and gathering the reins. The bay shifted beneath him, eager to be moving again. Nathan touched the brim of his hat in a gesture that was somehow both respectful and affectionate, and then he was riding away, the jars of flowers clinking softly in his saddlebags. Catherine stood in the mud, watching him go, her hand clutched around the silver dollars he had given her. $3 was more than she usually made in a week. It would buy real meat, flour for bread, maybe even a bit of sugar for coffee. But it was the way he had given it to her, like it was nothing and everything at the same time, like her flowers were worth that much, because she was the one selling them. That made her heart beat faster. She had not felt this way since the early days with Thomas, that flutter of possibility, of maybe. It felt like a betrayal and a relief all at once. "Well, well," a voice said from behind her, and Catherine turned to find Mrs. Chen standing in the doorway of the general store, her weathered face creased in a knowing smile. The older Chinese woman had been kind to Catherine when others had not, offering her the room when she had nowhere else to go. That is Nathan Pierce. Good man. Works hard, saves money, sends half his pay to his mother back in Texas. You could do worse. He just bought flowers, Catherine said, but even she could hear how weak the protest sounded. He bought all the flowers and looked at you like you were water in the desert, Mrs. Chen corrected. And you looked back. First time in 2 years I have seen you look at a man like he is anything but a potential problem. Maybe a good thing. Catherine bent to gather up her empty crate, needing to do something with her hands. It has only been 2 years. People will talk. People always talk, Mrs. Chen said dismissively. People talked when my husband brought me here from San Francisco, said Chinese woman had no place in Arizona. People talked when I kept the boarding house going after he died, said woman could not run business alone. People talk, talk, talk. Smart woman learns not to listen. Catherine had to smile at that. You make it sound simple. Is simple, Mrs. Chen said. You like him, you give him chance. You do not like him, you send him away, but you do not say no just because of what people say. You already survived 2 years of their talking. You can survive more if you choose. That was true enough. Catherine had endured the gossip, the speculation about whether she would remarry or become one of those sad, faded women who haunted the edges of town. Too proud to ask for charity, but too poor to do more than subsist. The idea that she might have a third option, that she might find another partner and build another life, had seemed impossible until Nathan Pierce rode up and bought all her flowers. She slept poorly that night, lying on her narrow bed in the small room that held all her remaining possessions, a trunk with a few clothes, a photograph of her and Thomas on their wedding day, the leather pouch with the $3 silver that she had not yet spent, because spending them would make this real somehow. She kept trying to remember exactly what Nathan had looked like, the sound of his voice, the way he had handled the jars of flowers like they were fragile and precious. By the time dawn came, she had half convinced herself she had imagined the entire encounter, that no man really approached a woman he did not know and declared his intentions so baldly. But when she walked out to the canyon to gather more flowers, she found herself picking the prettiest ones, the brightest colors, arranging them with more care than usual. Just in case. The day passed with agonizing slowness. She sold flowers to the usual customers, deflected the usual comments, and tried not to watch the sun's progress across the sky. Mrs. Chen caught her checking her reflection in the window 3 different times and just smiled that knowing smile without saying a word. At 6:30, Catherine gave up pretending she was not nervous and went to her room to change. She only had 2 dresses, the black morning dress and a faded blue calico that had been her second best dress when Thomas was alive. She put on the blue one, even though it felt strange after 2 years of unrelieved black, and tried to do something with her hair that did not involve simply pinning it back in a severe bun. She was still fussing with a stubborn curl when she heard the knock at 7 o'clock exactly. Mrs. Chen got to the door first, and Catherine could hear the older woman's voice, friendly but firm, establishing the rules of engagement. By the time Catherine made it to the front room, Nathan was standing just inside the doorway, hat in hand, looking slightly overwhelmed by Mrs. Chen's rapid-fire questions about his intentions and his background. "Mrs. Chen, please," Catherine said, feeling her face flush. "I am sure Mr. Pierce did not come here to be interrogated." "Is fine," Nathan said, and he was smiling, not threatened but amused. "Mrs. Chen is right to ask. Shows someone is looking out for you." He had cleaned up since yesterday, shaved the several days' growth of beard and put on what was clearly his best shirt, dark blue wool that brought out the color of his eyes. His hair was neatly combed, still damp, and he smelled faintly of soap and leather and something else, maybe hope. "You look beautiful," he said simply, and Catherine felt that flutter again, stronger this time. "Thank you," she managed. "Shall we walk?" They went out into the evening, which was clear and cool after the rain, the sky turning gold and purple as the sun sank toward the distant mountains. Camp Verde was small enough that, within a few minutes, they had reached the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to scrub grass and red earth, and the vast openness that characterized this part of Arizona territory. For a few minutes, they walked in silence, and Catherine was acutely aware of Nathan's presence beside her, the way he matched his long stride to her shorter one, the careful distance he maintained between them, close enough to talk, but not so close as to be improper. "Tell me about your flowers," Nathan said finally. "Where do you find them?" It was a safe topic, and Catherine found herself relaxing slightly as she described the canyon, the way the wildflowers grew in hidden pockets where water collected, the particular quality of light in the early morning that made the colors seem to glow. Nathan listened with every appearance of genuine interest, asking questions about which flowers were hardest to find, whether she ever worried about snakes or other dangers in the canyon, how she had learned which plants would keep in jars and which would wilt within hours. "My mother loved flowers," he said when she paused. "Back in Texas, she had a garden that was the envy of the county. Roses and honeysuckle and these big purple things, I can never remember the name. She used to say that a place was not a home until it had flowers growing around it. That is part of why I noticed you, I think. My mother would have approved of a woman who brought beauty to a place that needed it." "You said you send money to her," Catherine said, remembering what Mrs. Chen had told her. "Half my wages," Nathan confirmed. "My father died when I was 16, and I have 3 younger sisters who all needed raising. I have been working since then, sending money home so they could stay in school, get married proper when the time came. The youngest just married last year, married a good man who runs a feed store in Dallas. So now my mother has her own house and enough to live on, and I finally have the freedom to think about my own future." There was something in his voice, a note of weariness mixed with satisfaction, that made Catherine look at him more closely. "You have been supporting your family for 13 years. Seemed like the right thing to do," Nathan said with a shrug. "They needed help and I could provide it. But now it is done and I find I am ready to build something of my own. A home, a family, a life that is mine." "And you think I fit into that life?" Catherine asked, needing to understand. Nathan stopped walking and turned to face her. They were far enough from town now that the only sounds were the wind in the grass and the distant cry of a hawk. "I think," he said carefully, "that you are a woman who knows how to survive hardship, who knows how to work and keep going when things are difficult, who has not let loss break her, even though it would have been easy to give up. Those are rare qualities, and they are the qualities I need in a partner. Not someone who needs to be sheltered from the world, but someone who can stand beside me and face it together." It was perhaps the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to her, precisely because it was not about poetry or flowery compliments, but about recognition. He saw her strength, valued it, wanted it. "I do not know if I can be what you are hoping for," Catherine said honestly. "I cared for my husband. His death it was very hard. I am not sure I know how to open my heart to that risk again." "I am not asking you to decide right now," Nathan said. "I am asking you to give me time to show you who I am, to let me prove that I am worth the risk. And in the meantime, we can be friends. We can talk and walk and get to know each other without any promises or expectations beyond that. Would that be acceptable, friends?" It was such a simple word, but it offered a path forward that did not require her to make any grand declarations or terrifying commitments. She could be friends with this cowboy who bought flowers and spoke plainly and looked at her like she mattered. "Yes," Catherine said. "I think I would like that." The smile that lit Nathan's face was answer enough. They walked for another hour until the stars were beginning to appear and the evening chill was making Catherine shiver in her thin dress. Nathan noticed immediately and insisted they turn back, keeping up a steady stream of conversation about the Running Creek Ranch where he worked, the challenges of managing a crew of cowboys who were all certain they knew better than the foreman, the plans the owner had for expanding the herd. When they reached the boarding house, Nathan saw her to the door but made no move to try to kiss her or even take her hand. "May I call on you again?" he asked. "Perhaps Sunday after church if you attend." "I attend," Catherine confirmed. She had kept going to services even through the worst of her grief, finding some comfort in the familiar rituals. "I would like that." "Then I will see you Sunday," Nathan said, and touched his hat brim in that gesture that was becoming familiar. "Sleep well, Catherine." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the intimacy of it, the presumption and the invitation it contained, made her breath catch. But he was already walking away, back straight, boots ringing on the wooden sidewalk, and she was left standing in the doorway wondering what exactly she had just agreed to. The next few weeks fell into a pattern that began to feel almost like courtship, though Catherine tried not to think of it that way. Nathan called on her twice a week, always with advance notice, always proper and respectful. They walked, they talked, and slowly, carefully, Catherine began to learn who Nathan Pierce really was beneath the surface. He was, she discovered, a man of deep loyalties and quiet faith. He spoke of his family with obvious affection, of his mother's strength and his sister's various personalities, the youngest a schoolteacher, the middle one married to a rancher, the eldest running a dressmaking business in Dallas. He talked about the years on the cattle drives, the dangers and the camaraderie, the way you learned who you could trust when you were weeks from civilization with only your fellow cowboys between you and disaster. He was well read, which surprised her until he explained that his mother had insisted all her children know their letters and had made him take books with him when he left home at 16. He had read them over and over during the long nights on the trail, and then traded them at various towns for new ones, building an education that was unconventional but thorough. He could quote Shakespeare and the Bible with equal facility, and he had opinions on everything from politics to the best way to break a horse. He was also, Catherine realized with growing awareness, falling in love with her. It was there in the way he looked at her when he thought she was not paying attention, in the care he took to remember small things she mentioned in passing, in the gifts that began to appear, nothing too expensive or presumptuous, but thoughtful. A book of poetry when she mentioned missing having things to read. A pair of work gloves when he noticed her hands were raw from picking flowers and doing laundry. A jar of honey from a farm outside town because she had once said she missed having something sweet. What surprised her more was that she was falling in love back. It crept up on her slowly, so gradually that she did not realize it was happening until one Sunday afternoon when Nathan could not make their usual walk because of work at the ranch, and she found herself disappointed out of all proportion to the event. She missed him, missed his steady presence and his quiet humor, and the way he made her feel like she was interesting and valued and seen. She started looking forward to their time together with an eagerness that felt both wonderful and terrifying. When he smiled at her, her heart beat faster. When their hands accidentally brushed reaching for the same flower to examine during a walk, she felt the touch all the way to her bones. She caught herself thinking about what it would be like to kiss him, to be held by him, to wake up beside him in the morning, and the thoughts made her blush and feel guilty and excited all at once. It had been 3 months since that first meeting in the mud when Nathan asked her to come see the Running Creek Ranch. "I want you to see where I work," he said, "where I spend my days. It is important to me that you understand what kind of life I am offering if you decide you want it." Catherine agreed, and the following Saturday, Nathan arrived with a gentle mare for her to ride, explaining that it was too far to walk. She had not been on a horse since Thomas died, and she was rusty at first, but it came back to her quickly, and soon they were riding side by side across the high desert landscape. The Running Creek Ranch was beautiful in the way that Arizona could be beautiful when you learned to see it. All red rock and vast sky, and the green ribbon of cottonwoods that marked the creek giving the place its name. The ranch house was substantial, built of adobe and wood, and the outbuildings were well maintained. Cattle dotted the landscape, hardy breeds that could survive the harsh conditions, and Catherine could see several cowboys working in the distance. Nathan introduced her to the owner, Mr. Samuel Thornton, a weathered man in his 60s who had built the ranch from nothing 30 years ago. He greeted Catherine with grave courtesy and clear curiosity, and she realized that Nathan must have told him about her, that this meeting was significant. "Nathan here is the best foreman I have had in 20 years, Mr. Thornton said bluntly. "Knows cattle, knows men, knows how to get work done without drama. I have been hoping he would put down roots here, build something permanent. Would be a shame to lose him to some other outfit that offered more." "I am not going anywhere," Nathan said firmly. "I have found what I was looking for here." His eyes were on Catherine as he said it, and she felt her face heat under the dual scrutiny of the two men. Mr. Thornton chuckled. "Well then, Miss Ashford, would you like to see the rest of the place?" Nathan has been talking about building a house on the western section, near the creek. Good land there, plenty of water, nice view of the mountains. Be a fine place to raise a family if a man was so inclined. The implication was clear, and Catherine felt her pulse race. This was not just a casual visit. This was Nathan showing her a future, concrete and specific, that involved a house and land and the raising of a family. It was a proposal in everything but name, and the realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. They rode out to the western section, and it was indeed beautiful, a gentle rise of land where the creek curved and the cottonwoods grew thick. Nathan dismounted and helped Catherine down, his hands strong and steady at her waist, lingering just a moment longer than strictly necessary. "I have been saving for 12 years, he said quietly. "I have enough to build a good house, not a mansion but solid, with room to grow. Mr. Thornton has agreed to sell me this section at a fair price, and I can work it while still serving as foreman. In time, maybe I could build it into something bigger, run my own herd. But that is all future plans. Right now, I just wanted you to see it, to imagine it if you can." Catherine walked to the edge of the creek looking out at the land. She could imagine it, that was the problem. She could see a house there, could see a garden like Nathan's mother had, could see children playing by the water under the watchful eye of their parents. Could see herself and Nathan growing old together in this place, building a life from the red earth and the endless sky. "I am afraid," she said, not looking at him. "Thomas and we had plans too. We were going to build something, make a home, and then he died and all those plans died with him. What if I let myself hope again and it all falls apart?" She heard Nathan move closer, felt him standing just behind her. "I cannot promise you that nothing bad will ever happen," he said. "I cannot promise I will never die or that life will not throw hardships at us. but I can promise that I will do everything in my power to build something lasting with you. I can promise to work hard and treat you right and love you with everything I have for as long as I live. And I can promise that even if the worst happens, you will not face it alone, because whatever we build together. That is what partnership means." Catherine turned to face him, and she found she was crying, tears running down her face that she could not quite explain. They were not sad tears exactly, but something more complicated, grief and hope and fear and possibility all mixed together. Nathan reached up very slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and gently brushed the tears from her cheeks with his thumbs. His hands were calloused from years of hard work, rough against her skin, but his touch was incredibly tender. "I do not need an answer today," he said. "But I need you to know that I am serious about this, about you. I am not playing games or passing time. I want to marry you, Catherine Ashford. I want to build that house and fill it with our children and grow old with you in this place. And I am willing to wait as long as it takes for you to be ready to say yes. But I need to know if there is a chance, if I am hoping for something that could actually happen, or if I am wasting both our time." Catherine looked up at him, at this good man who had seen her at her lowest and decided she was worth courting, worth waiting for, worth building a life with. She thought about the past 2 years, the loneliness and the struggle and the slow death of hope. She thought about the past 3 months, the way Nathan had carefully, patiently, shown her who he was and what he could offer. She thought about the way her heart beat faster when she saw him, the way she missed him when he was gone, the way she had started to imagine a future again for the first time since Thomas died. "There is a chance," she whispered. "I cannot promise when I will be ready, but there is a chance. I think I am falling in love with you, Nathan Pierce. And that terrifies me, but it also feels like waking up after a long sleep." The look on his face was worth every moment of fear and uncertainty. He pulled her into his arms, just holding her, and Catherine let herself lean into him, let herself be held and comforted and cherished. They stood like that for a long time by the creek where Nathan wanted to build their house, and Catherine felt something in her chest that had been clenched tight since Thomas died begin to slowly, carefully, unfold. When Nathan finally pulled back, he was smiling. "I can work with a chance," he said. "A chance is all I need." They rode back to town in the golden afternoon light, and when Nathan helped her down from the horse, his hands lingered at her waist again. "Thank you for today," he said, "for being willing to imagine it." "Thank you for being patient with me," Catherine replied, "for understanding why I need time." "I would wait years if that is what it took," Nathan said simply, and she believed him. That evening, Catherine sat in her small room and looked at the photograph of Thomas. He smiled out at her from the frame, forever young, forever the man she had married at 22. She had loved him, truly loved him, and his death had shattered her world. But she was not the same woman who had married him, and the world was not the same place. She had survived, had clawed her way through grief to something like peace, and now Nathan was offering her a chance at something more. "I will always love you," she told the photograph softly. "But I think I need to live again. I think you would understand that. I hope you would want that for me." The photograph did not answer, of course, but in the silence of her room, Catherine felt something settle in her heart. Permission, maybe, or just acceptance. Thomas was gone, but she was still here, and she had a right to reach for happiness if it was being offered. The next time Nathan called on her, Catherine met him at the door wearing the blue dress again, and when he smiled at seeing her, she smiled back with less reservation than before. They walked to their usual spot outside of town, and Catherine found herself telling him things she had not told anyone, about the early days of her marriage, about the dreams she and Thomas had shared, about the crushing loneliness of widowhood and the slow process of learning to function again. Nathan listened without judgment, asking questions when appropriate, but mostly just letting her talk. When she finally wound down, he took a deep breath and began to tell her about his own losses, about the father who had died suddenly of a heart condition, about the weight of responsibility that had settled on his teenage shoulders, about the dreams he had deferred for years to take care of his family. "I do not regret it," he said, "but there were times I wondered if I would ever get to have my own life, my own choices. And then I saw you, kneeling in the mud selling flowers, and I thought, there she is. There is the woman worth waiting for. There is the life I want." "You decided all that from watching me sell flowers?" Catherine asked, half amused, half awed. "I decided you were worth investigating," Nathan corrected with a grin. "The rest I have learned over these past months, and every day I am more certain." As summer deepened into fall, their courtship continued to unfold. Nathan took Catherine to the church social he had mentioned that very first day, and if people talked about the widow arriving on the arm of the Running Creek foreman, Catherine found she did not care as much as she had thought she would. Nathan danced with her, holding her properly but close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, and when the evening ended, he walked her home and asked if he could see her again the next day. They went on picnics, riding out to scenic spots around Camp Verde that Nathan had discovered in his explorations of the territory. They attended Sunday services together, sitting side by side in the pew while people whispered, but Nathan held his head high and offered Catherine his arm without apology. They spent evenings on the porch of the boarding house, talking while Mrs. Chen sat nearby doing mending, a perfectly acceptable chaperone who nonetheless managed to be unobtrusive. On one of those evenings, as the first chill of autumn touched the air, Nathan reached over and took Catherine's hand, lacing his fingers through hers. It was the first time he had initiated such contact, and Catherine felt her breath catch. His hand was large and warm, engulfing hers, and the simple intimacy of it made her heart race. "I have been thinking," Nathan said quietly, "about what you said at the ranch, about being afraid to hope. And I want you to know that I understand that fear. I have been afraid too, afraid that I was presuming too much, that you could never really care for a rough cowboy who smells like horses and cattle most of the time. But I also know that nothing good comes without risk, and you are worth any risk." Catherine looked down at their joined hands, at the way his thumb was slowly stroking across her knuckles. "You do not smell like horses right now," she said, and was rewarded by his quiet laugh. "I cleaned up special," he admitted. "Been doing that every time I call on you. Mrs. Thornton probably thinks I have developed an unnatural fondness for her laundry soap." The image of Nathan carefully scrubbing himself clean before every visit, wanting to be presentable for her, made Catherine's heart squeeze. "I would not mind if you smelled like horses," she said softly. "It is an honest smell, the smell of hard work." "You say the nicest things," Nathan said, and his voice had gone rough with emotion. They sat in silence for a while, hands still joined, and Catherine felt something shift inside her. The fear was still there, would probably always be there on some level, but it was no longer the dominant force. Stronger than the fear was the growing certainty that Nathan Pierce was a good man, an honorable man, a man she could trust with her heart. "I need to tell you something," she said finally. "About Thomas." Nathan's hand tightened on hers, but he said nothing, just waited. "We were young when we married," Catherine began. "Too young, probably. We thought love was enough to overcome anything. And we did love each other, but we also fought sometimes, about money and about the ranch and about whether we should have stayed in Missouri. He could be stubborn and so could I, and there were times when we went to bed angry with each other. It was not. It was not always perfect. No marriage is, Nathan said gently. I know that now, Catherine said. But for a long time after he died, I remembered only the good parts. The love, the laughter, the dreams. I forgot about the fights and the frustrations and the times when we hurt each other without meaning to. I made him into a saint in my memory, and that made it impossible to imagine being with anyone else, because how could anyone compare to a saint? She paused, gathering her courage. But lately, I have been remembering the truth, that he was just a man, flawed and human, and I loved him anyway. And that has made me realize that I could love another man, flaws and all, that I could love you if I let myself. Nathan's hand trembled slightly in hers. Could love, he asked. Or do love? Catherine took a deep breath. Do love, she said, and the words felt like stepping off a cliff, terrifying and exhilarating. I love you, Nathan Pierce. I do not know when it happened exactly, but somewhere between the flowers and the walks and the way you look at me like I am precious, I fell in love with you. And I am still afraid, but I am also ready to take the risk, if you still want me. For a moment, Nathan did not move, did not speak, and Catherine felt panic rise. Had she misread everything? Was it too soon? But then he was moving, pulling her to her feet, his hands framing her face with infinite gentleness. If I still want you. His voice was raw. Catherine, I have wanted you since the moment I saw you in the mud, refusing to give up, refusing to let circumstances break you. I have loved you since our first walk, when you told me about your flowers like you were sharing secrets. I will want you and love you until the day I die and probably beyond that. So yes, I still want you. I will always want you. And then he kissed her, and it was nothing like the kisses Catherine remembered from her marriage. Thomas's kisses had been enthusiastic but often clumsy, the kisses of a young man learning as he went. Nathan's kiss was confident but tender, the kiss of a man who knew exactly what he was doing and was taking his time to do it right. His lips moved against hers with gentle pressure, asking rather than demanding, and when Catherine responded, opening to him, he made a sound low in his throat that made her insides melt. They kissed for a long time, there on the porch with Mrs. Chen undoubtedly watching from inside, and when they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Nathan rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed, his hand still cradling her face. Marry me, he said. I know I said I would be patient, but I cannot wait any more. Marry me, Catherine. Let me build you that house and fill it with our children and spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice. Yes, Catherine said, and the word came out on a laugh that was half sob. Yes, I will marry you. Nathan picked her up and spun her around, right there on the porch, laughing with pure joy. When he set her down, he immediately kissed her again, and this time there was more heat in it, a promise of what their marriage bed would hold. Catherine felt herself responding in ways she had not felt in years, desire sparking to life in her belly, and when they finally broke apart, she was flushed and breathless. When? Nathan asked. Please say soon. I do not think I can wait months for a fancy wedding. I do not need fancy, Catherine said. I need you. 2 weeks. Is that enough time to arrange things? 2 weeks is perfect, Nathan said. I will talk to the preacher tomorrow, and to Mr. Thornton about starting work on the house immediately. I want you to have a proper home to come to. I do not need a house to be ready, Catherine protested. I can stay at the boarding house until it is finished. Absolutely not, Nathan said firmly. You will be my wife, and my wife will have a roof over her head that I have provided. Mr. Thornton has said we can stay in the foreman's cottage until our house is ready. It is small, but it is clean and private, and it is ours. The word ours made Catherine's heart sing. After 2 years of struggling alone, Of mine being such a lonely, limited word. The idea of ours was almost overwhelming. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur. Nathan was true to his word, arranging everything with an efficiency that suggested this was just another task to be accomplished, like organizing a cattle drive or breaking a difficult horse. The preacher agreed to perform the ceremony on a Saturday afternoon. Nathan bought Catherine a ring, a simple gold band that he had to ride all the way to Prescott to find because Camp Verd's general store did not carry such things. Mrs. Chen insisted on making Catherine a new dress, a simple but beautiful creation in pale yellow that was infinitely more appropriate for a wedding than either the mourning black or the faded calico. Catherine sold flowers every day and saved every penny, wanting to have something to contribute to their new household. Nathan protested that it was not necessary, that he had enough for both of them, but Catherine insisted. She was not going into this marriage as a supplicant or a charity case, but as a partner, and partners contributed. The night before the wedding, Catherine sat with Mrs. Chen in the small room that would no longer be hers after tomorrow. The older woman was hemming the yellow dress, making final adjustments, and the companionable silence between them was comfortable. "You are making the right choice," Mrs. Chen said finally, without looking up from her sewing. "That Nathan, he is good man. He will take care of you, but he will also let you be strong. Not all men can do that." "I know," Catherine said. "I am lucky." "He is lucky too," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "Do not forget that. You bring much to this marriage: strength, courage, the ability to survive hard times. These are valuable things. You are not burden he is taking on. You are partner he is gaining." Catherine had not realized how much she needed to hear that until the words settled into her heart. She had been thinking of herself as damaged goods, as the widow Nathan was rescuing out of kindness. But that was not how Nathan saw her, and it was not how she needed to see herself. She was strong, she had survived, and she had worth beyond what any man might grant her. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. For the room, for the friendship, for the wisdom." "You are welcome, Mrs. Chen said. "Now try on this dress one more time. Make sure it fits perfect." The dress fit perfectly. The wedding was small, held in the simple wooden church with only a handful of witnesses. Mrs. Chen was there, and Mr. Thornton, and a few of the other cowboys from the Running Creek Ranch who had become Nathan's friends. The preacher's wife played the piano, a cheerful if slightly out-of-tune rendition of a hymn, and Catherine walked down the short aisle alone, having no family to give her away. But when she reached the front of the church and saw Nathan waiting for her, tall and handsome in a new suit that he must have purchased specially, all her nervousness melted away. He looked at her like she was the answer to every prayer he had ever prayed, and when she placed her hand in his, it felt like coming home. The ceremony was brief, the traditional words about love and honor and cherishing. When the preacher asked if Catherine took Nathan to be her husband, she said, "I do," in a clear, strong voice that rang through the small church. When Nathan said the same words, his voice was rough with emotion, and she saw him blink rapidly, fighting back tears. They exchanged rings, and when Nathan slipped the gold band onto her finger, Catherine looked down at it next to Thomas's ring, which she had moved to her right hand that morning. 2 rings, 2 lives, 2 loves. It was possible to honor the past while embracing the future, and that was what she was doing. "You may kiss your bride," the preacher said with a smile, and Nathan did not need to be told twice. He pulled Catherine into his arms and kissed her thoroughly, to the point where someone in the back of the church whistled, and the preacher cleared his throat in gentle reproof. When they broke apart, both were grinning, and Catherine felt lighter than she had in years. The weight of grief and struggle had not disappeared entirely, but it had lifted enough that she could breathe freely, could imagine joy and hope and all the good things that might lie ahead. The wedding breakfast was held at the boarding house, with Mrs. Chen providing enough food to feed everyone twice over. There were toasts, ribald jokes from the Cowboys that made Catherine blush and Nathan laugh, and genuine good wishes from everyone present. Mr. Thornton pulled Nathan aside at one point, and Catherine saw him shake the younger man's hand and say something that made Nathan's face go solemn with gratitude. Later, when she asked what had been said, Nathan told her that Mr. Thornton had given them the land for the house as a wedding present, refusing to accept any payment. He said any man who would court a woman as patiently and respectfully as I courted you deserved a good start, Nathan said, and that he was proud to have me as his foreman and his friend. By late afternoon, the celebration was winding down, and Nathan helped Catherine into the wagon he had borrowed for the occasion, all her meager possessions already loaded. They would spend tonight in the foreman's cottage, and then tomorrow Nathan would return to work, while Catherine began the task of settling into their temporary home and planning the permanent one. The ride to the ranch was quiet, both of them tired from the day's emotions. But it was a comfortable quiet, the silence of two people who did not need to fill every moment with words. Nathan's hand rested on Catherine's knee, a casual intimacy that made her heart beat faster every time she thought about what the night would bring. The foreman's cottage was small, just 2 rooms and a lean-to kitchen, but it was clean and private as Nathan had promised. Someone, probably Mrs. Thornton, had left flowers on the table and made up the bed with fresh linens. There was wood stacked by the stove and water in the pitcher, all the small touches that turned a house into a home. It is not much, Nathan said, suddenly nervous, but it is ours for now. It is perfect, Catherine said honestly. After 2 years in a single room, this felt like a palace. They stood awkwardly in the middle of the main room, suddenly confronted with the reality of being married, of being alone together, of what came next. Catherine had been married before, but this felt different, new in a way that made her almost as nervous as a true virgin. Nathan seemed to sense her uncertainty. "Are you hungry?" he asked. "Mrs. Thornton left us some supper, I think." "I am not hungry," Catherine said. "Are you?" "No," Nathan admitted. He took a step closer to her, then another, until he was standing directly in front of her. "Catherine, I need you to know that we can take this as slow as you need. I know you have been married before, but this is still new and I will not rush you. We have all the time in the world." His consideration, his awareness of her potential fears, made Catherine love him even more. She reached up and placed her palm against his cheek, feeling the slight stubble there despite his careful shave that morning. "I do not want to go slow," she said softly. "I want my husband." The word husband seemed to break something in Nathan's careful control. He pulled her against him and kissed her with all the pent-up passion of months of restraint, and Catherine responded with equal fervor. They stumbled toward the bedroom, shedding clothes as they went. And if there was awkwardness, there was also laughter and tenderness, and a growing heat that burned away any lingering hesitation. When Nathan finally made her his wife in truth, Catherine felt tears slip down her temples, but they were not sad tears. They were tears of relief, of release, of coming back to life after a long winter. Nathan noticed and paused, concerned, until she pulled him down for a kiss and told him not to stop. "Please do not stop." They made love slowly the first time, learning each other's bodies, discovering what brought pleasure and what did not. Nathan was a generous lover, attentive and patient, determined to ensure Catherine's satisfaction before seeking his own. When they finally lay tangled together in the aftermath, Both breathless and satisfied, Catherine felt more at peace than she had in years. "I love you," Nathan said, his voice drowsy and content. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret marrying me." "I already know I will not regret it," Catherine said. "You are everything I needed, even when I did not know I needed it." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, and when Catherine woke in the night briefly, disoriented, Nathan tightened his hold and murmured her name in his sleep. She smiled and let herself drift back under, safe and warm and loved. The next weeks settled into a rhythm. Nathan worked long days at the ranch, often leaving before dawn and returning after dark, but he never failed to greet Catherine with a kiss and ask about her day. Catherine, for her part, threw herself into making the cottage into a home, cooking and cleaning and beginning to plan the garden she would plant at their permanent house. She still picked flowers in the mornings, but now she sold them to contribute to their savings for furniture and household goods rather than out of desperate necessity. The difference in motivation made all the difference in how the work felt. She was building something now, not just surviving. The construction of their house began in early November, with Nathan working on it every spare moment he could find. Catherine helped where she could, and gradually the structure took shape, rising from the red earth like something solid and permanent. It was not large, but it was well built, with 2 bedrooms for the children they hoped to have, a good-sized main room with a fireplace, and a separate kitchen that would not heat up the whole house in summer. By January of 1884, the house was finished enough to move into, though there was still work to be done on the interior. Catherine walked through it with wonder, touching the walls that Nathan had built, looking out the windows at the view of the mountains, imagining the life they would live here. "What do you think?" Nathan asked anxiously. "Is it what you hoped for?" "It is more," Catherine said honestly. "It is a home, Nathan, our home, and it is perfect." They moved in on a cold January day, with help from the other ranch hands who good-naturedly hauled their few pieces of furniture and boxes of household goods. Mrs. Chen sent a care package of preserved foods and practical items, along with a note that made Catherine tear up with its simple good wishes. By nightfall, they were alone in their own house, and Nathan built a fire in the fireplace while Catherine made coffee. They sat together on the floor in front of the fire, their backs against the sofa that was one of their few pieces of furniture, and looked around at the bare walls and empty spaces that they would fill over time. "We did it," Nathan said softly. "We built something." "We did," Catherine agreed. "And we will keep building." That night, they christened their new bedroom with lovemaking that was both passionate and tender, and when Catherine fell asleep afterward, she dreamed of flowers growing around the house, of children playing by the creek, of long years stretching ahead filled with ordinary joys and sorrows and the steady companionship of a man who loved her. Spring came, and with it the revelation that Catherine was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, the familiar signs that she remembered from a pregnancy early in her marriage to Thomas that had ended in miscarriage. This time, though, everything progressed normally, and by the time the flowers were blooming in the garden she had planted around the house, her condition was obvious. Nathan was beside himself with joy and terror in equal measure. He treated Catherine like she was made of glass, constantly worried that she was doing too much, lifting too much, working too hard. She bore his fussing with patience and amusement, knowing it came from love and also knowing that she would do what needed to be done regardless of his concerns. "I am pregnant, not dying," she told him after he tried to forbid her from carrying a basket of laundry. "Women have been doing this since the beginning of time." "Not my woman," Nathan said stubbornly. "Not carrying my child. Let me help at least." So Catherine let him help, and they worked together through the summer as her belly grew and the heat beat down, and the house filled slowly with the things they would need for the baby. Nathan built a cradle with his own hands, sanding and oiling the wood until it was smooth as silk. Catherine sewed tiny clothes, hemmed blankets, and tried not to think about all the things that could go wrong. The baby came in early October, on a day when the heat had finally broken and the air smelled of coming winter. The labor was long and difficult, and there were hours when Catherine was sure she was going to die, that she had survived widowhood and poverty and loneliness only to be killed by childbirth like so many women before her. But Nathan was there through all of it, holding her hand, wiping her face with cool cloths, telling her she was strong, she could do this. He believed in her. And when the midwife finally placed a squalling, red-faced infant in Catherine's arms and announced, "It is a boy," Catherine looked down at her son and felt something in her chest expand almost painfully. "A boy," Nathan said, his voice choked with emotion. He touched the baby's tiny hand with one finger, and the infant immediately gripped it with surprising strength. "Our son. What should we name him?" Catherine asked, looking up at her husband. "I was thinking Thomas," Nathan said quietly, "if that would not hurt too much. To honor your first husband, who brought you west even if he could not stay to see what you built here." Catherine felt tears spill down her cheeks. That Nathan would suggest such a thing, would want to honor the man who had come before him, showed the depth of his character and his love. "Thomas Nathan," she said, "after both the men I have loved." "Thomas Nathan Pierce," Nathan said, trying out the name. "It is perfect. He is perfect. You are perfect." The baby, oblivious to the emotion swirling around him, yawned and fell asleep in Catherine's arms. The first year of Thomas's life was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. Catherine had forgotten, or perhaps had never fully known, how much work an infant required. But Nathan threw himself into fatherhood with the same intensity he brought to everything else, getting up in the night to walk the baby when he was fussy, changing diapers without complaint, entertaining Thomas with silly faces and songs when Catherine needed a break. They were a family now, no longer just two people building a life but three, with all the joy and terror that entailed. Catherine watched Nathan with their son and fell in love with him all over again, seeing the tenderness he brought to every interaction, the way he held the baby like he was the most precious thing in the world. When Thomas was a year old, Catherine found herself pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect or perhaps because she was not carrying quite as large a baby. Their daughter arrived in the summer of 1886, a tiny, fierce creature with Nathan's dark hair and Catherine's stubborn chin. "What about Abigail?" Nathan suggested, holding his daughter with the ease of someone who had learned from his son. "Abigail Grace." "Abigail Grace Pierce," Catherine repeated. "I love it." With two children, the house that had seemed so spacious began to feel smaller. But it was a good kind of full, a richness of life rather than a burden. Catherine's days were consumed with cooking and cleaning and tending to the children, but she still found time to maintain her flower garden, which had grown from a few plants around the house to a riot of color that drew butterflies and hummingbirds. Nathan had been promoted to ranch manager, a position that came with more responsibility, but also more pay and more respect. He and Mr. Thornton had developed a true friendship, and when the older man's health began to fail, he increasingly relied on Nathan to make major decisions about the ranch's operations. When Thomas was 5 and Abigail 3, Catherine found herself pregnant once more, and this time Nathan built an addition onto the house. 2 more bedrooms to accommodate their growing family. The third baby was another boy, quieter than his siblings, with Catherine's light hair and a thoughtful expression that suggested he was taking in everything around him. "Samuel," Catherine said when Nathan asked what she wanted to name him. "After Mr. Thornton, who gave us the land for this house and has been so good to us." Mr. Thornton himself came to visit when he heard, and Catherine saw the old man wipe tears from his eyes as he held the baby who bore his name. "You have built something fine here," he told Nathan and Catherine. "A family, a home, a life. It does my heart good to see it." He died 6 months later, peacefully in his sleep, and left the Running Creek Ranch to Nathan in his will. The other hands were not surprised. Everyone had known Mr. Thornton thought of Nathan as the son he had never had. But Nathan was humbled and determined to honor the legacy he had been given. "We own a ranch," he said to Catherine that night, still seeming dazed by the turn of events. "An actual ranch. How did a cowboy from Texas end up here?" "He bought flowers from a widow and asked for her hand," Catherine said with a smile, "and they built a life together one day at a time. Over the next decade, they continued to build." The ranch prospered under Nathan's management, growing from a mid-sized operation to one of the most successful in the territory. Catherine raised their children, instilling in them the values of hard work and resilience that had carried her through the worst times of her life. She also expanded her flower growing, selling not just to individuals but to businesses in Prescott and even Phoenix, developing a small but profitable enterprise of her own. Thomas, their eldest, grew into a serious boy who loved books and learning, eventually going to school in Prescott and talking about becoming a lawyer. Abigail was the wild one, riding horses almost before she could walk, determined to be a rancher like her father. Samuel was the quiet observer, the one who noticed things others missed, who had a gift for working with animals that suggested he would follow in Nathan's footsteps. 2 more children arrived over the years, twin girls who kept Catherine busier than she had ever imagined possible. Ella and Emma were born when Catherine was 38, a surprise that made her laugh even as she despaired of ever sleeping through the night again. But Nathan hired help for her, and the older children pitched in, and somehow they managed. By the time Catherine turned 45 in the spring of 1902, she and Nathan had been married for nearly 18 years. They stood together one evening on the porch of the house he had built, watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold, and Catherine thought about the journey that had brought them here. "You ever regret it?" Nathan asked, as if reading her mind. "Marrying me, taking a chance on a cowboy who bought all your flowers?" "Never," Catherine said firmly. "Not for one single moment. You gave me back my life, Nathan. You showed me that it was possible to survive grief and find joy again. I will never regret that." "I am the one who got the better deal," Nathan said, pulling her against his side. "A beautiful wife, 5 incredible children, a ranch that is more successful than I ever dreamed. All because I saw you in the mud and knew you were what I had been looking for." They stood together in silence for a while, comfortable in each other's presence the way only people who had built a life together could be. Inside the house, they could hear the twins arguing about something, Thomas trying to mediate, Abigail laughing. It was the sound of family, of home, of everything they had created together. "You ever think about him?" Nathan asked quietly. "Thomas." Catherine considered the question. She had stopped wearing Thomas's ring years ago, had put it away in a box where it was safe but not visible. But she had not forgotten him, would never forget the young man who had brought her west and loved her as well as he knew how. "Sometimes," she said honestly, "but not with pain anymore, just with gratitude for what we had and acceptance that it was over." He gave me good years, and he brought me to this place where I eventually found you. I think he would be happy that I did not give up, that I found love again and built something strong." "I hope so," Nathan said, "because I am grateful to him too in a way. He loved you well enough that you knew what love should look like, well enough that when I offered it, you recognized it and had the courage to say yes." Catherine turned in his arms to face him properly. Age had touched them both. There was silver in Nathan's dark hair now, and she knew there were lines around her eyes that had not been there when they married. But when she looked at her husband, she still saw the cowboy who had bought all her flowers, who had looked at her like she was precious, who had been willing to wait as long as it took for her to be ready to love again. "I love you," she said simply. "I loved you when we married, and I love you more now. Every year, every day, every challenge we have faced together has made that love deeper and stronger. You are my partner, my friend, my home, and I thank God every day that you were brave enough to buy those flowers." Nathan kissed her then, tender and sweet, the kiss of two people who had built a life together and knew it would carry them through whatever years remained. When they pulled apart, he was smiling. "Come to bed, Mrs. Pierce," he said. "The children can fend for themselves for one evening." "Mrs. Pierce," Catherine repeated, savoring the name that had been hers for 18 years and would be hers for however many years God granted them. "I still love hearing that." They went inside together, hand in hand, and if the children rolled their eyes at their parents' obvious affection, they did so with smiles, secure in the knowledge that they were loved and that their home was built on a foundation of deep and abiding love. The years continued to roll forward, bringing their share of challenges and triumphs. The children grew and made their own ways in the world. Thomas became a lawyer as he had dreamed, moving to Phoenix, but coming home often to visit. Abigail married a rancher from a neighboring spread and proved to be a formidable businesswoman in her own right. Samuel took over more and more of the day-to-day operations of Running Creek Ranch as Nathan's back and knees began to protest the hard physical labor of earlier years. The twins, Ella and Emma, were inseparable through their childhood and well into adulthood. Both had inherited Catherine's gift with flowers and turned it into a thriving business, shipping plants and arrangements all over the Arizona territory and beyond. By the time Arizona achieved statehood in 1912, Nathan and Catherine were in their 50s, with grandchildren beginning to arrive, and the knowledge that they had built something that would last beyond their lifetimes. The ranch was prosperous. The children were settled and happy, and they had the satisfaction of knowing they had done well with the opportunities life had given them. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Nathan surprised Catherine with a party attended by friends and family from all over the state. The house that had once seemed so spacious was packed to bursting with people, with children running underfoot and the older folks sitting on the porch trading stories about the old days. At one point in the evening, Nathan stood up to make a toast, and the crowd quieted to hear him. He was still tall and strong despite the silver in his hair and the weathering of his face, still the commanding presence he had always been. 25 years ago, he began, I saw a woman kneeling in the mud, selling flowers to anyone who would buy them. She was a widow, struggling to survive, and she had every reason to be bitter and broken by the hardships life had thrown at her. But she was not broken. She was strong and stubborn and beautiful, and I knew in that moment that I would do anything to make her my wife. He paused, looking directly at Catherine, and she felt tears prick her eyes at the love she saw in his face. So I bought all her flowers, Nathan continued, and I asked for her hand, and by some miracle she said yes. These 25 years have been the best of my life. Every morning I wake up grateful that she took a chance on a cowboy who had nothing to offer but hard work and devotion. Catherine, you made me the man I am today. You gave me children I am proud of, a home I cherish, and a love that has sustained me through everything. Here is to 25 more years, and then 25 after that, and as many as God will grant us. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, and Catherine rose to embrace her husband. They kissed to the sound of whooping from the younger generation and approving murmurs from the older, and when they pulled apart, both had tears streaming down their faces. "I would do it all again," Catherine said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Every hardship, every struggle, every moment of fear, because it all led me here, to this man, to this family, to this life, and I would not trade it for anything. The party continued late into the night, with music and dancing, and the kind of joy that comes from celebrating something truly worth celebrating. When everyone had finally gone home or settled down to sleep in various corners of the house and outbuildings, Nathan and Catherine walked out to the creek, to the spot where he had first shown her the land and asked her to imagine a future. "You remember?" Nathan asked, gesturing to the view that was silvered by moonlight. "I remember being terrified," Catherine said. "Terrified that I was hoping for something that could be taken away, that I would lose you like I lost Thomas. And now I know that nothing is certain in this life," Catherine said. "We could have tomorrow taken from us without warning, but I also know that the love we have built is real and strong, and that even if we only had one more day together, it would be worth it. Because you have given me so many good days, Nathan, so many years of partnership and joy and the kind of deep companionship that makes everything else worthwhile." They stood together in silence, watching the moonlight on the water, listening to the night sounds of the desert. After a while, Nathan spoke again. "I have been thinking about the future," he said. "About what happens to the ranch when I am gone. Samuel is ready to take over full management, and he has good ideas about expansion and modernization. I thought maybe it was time for me to step back, let the next generation lead while I am still here to advise if needed." "And what would you do with your time?" Catherine asked, amused. "I thought maybe we could travel," Nathan said. "See some of the places we have always talked about but never had time to visit. Go to Texas so I can show you where I grew up, maybe even take a trip to San Francisco or back east to see the cities. We have earned some time for ourselves, Catherine. Time to enjoy the life we built without always working so hard to build more." The idea was appealing. Catherine had spent so much of her life focused on survival, and then on raising children and maintaining the household, that the thought of having time for leisure, for exploration, for simply being with Nathan without the constant demands of work, was almost foreign. But it was also exciting. "I think I would like that," she said. "As long as we always come back here, this is home, this will always be home." "Always," Nathan agreed. "This is where we built our life. This is where we will always return." Over the next few years, they did exactly that. Samuel took over management of the ranch with enthusiasm and skill, implementing new techniques and expanding the operation in ways that Nathan had not imagined, but could respect. And Nathan and Catherine traveled, seeing the country that had changed so much since they were young, marveling at trains and automobiles and electricity, at how quickly the frontier was becoming civilized. But they always came back to the ranch, to the house by the creek, to the place where Nathan had first told Catherine he wanted to build a life with her. It was their anchor, their constant, the physical manifestation of everything they had created together. As they entered their 60s and then 70s, they slowed down but did not stop. Catherine still tended her flower garden, though she let the commercial side of the business go to the twins. Nathan still walked the ranch every day, checking on the cattle and the hands, offering advice to Samuel when asked, but mostly just enjoying being part of something he had built. Their children and grandchildren visited often, filling the house with noise and chaos and love. Thomas brought his family from Phoenix, 3 sons who were all lawyers like their father. Abigail rode over regularly with her husband and daughters, all of whom were as horse-mad as their mother. Samuel was there every day, of course, often bringing his wife and children for dinner. The twins came and went as their business allowed, always bringing the latest flowers and news from their travels. It was a good life, a full life, exactly what Nathan had promised when he bought all those flowers in the mud so many years ago. On Catherine's 75th birthday in the spring of 1932, the whole family gathered again at the ranch for a celebration. She was older now, her hair completely white and her movements slower, but her mind was sharp and her spirit undimmed. Nathan, at 78, was equally aged but still vital, still the strong presence he had always been. That evening, after the party had wound down and the younger grandchildren had been put to bed, Catherine and Nathan sat together on the porch as they had done so many thousands of times before. The sunset was spectacular, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple that seemed to set the mountains on fire. "You know what day it is?" Nathan asked suddenly. Catherine thought for a moment, then smiled. "It is 49 years to the day since you bought all my flowers." 49 years, Nathan marveled. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like we have always been together. I cannot imagine a life without you, Catherine. I do not want to imagine it." "Then do not," Catherine said, taking his hand. "We are here now, together, and that is what matters. We have built something beautiful, Nathan. A life, a family, a legacy. When we are gone, this place will carry on, and our children and grandchildren will remember us and the love that made it all possible." "I just hope we have a few more years," Nathan said quietly. "I am not ready to let go of you yet." "Then we will hold on," Catherine said firmly. "We will hold on to each other and to this life for as long as we possibly can, because I am not ready to let go either." They sat together as the sun set, and the stars began to appear. 2 old people who had loved each other well and built something lasting. And if their hands were wrinkled and their bodies were failing them, their hearts were still as full, and their love was still as strong as the day Nathan Pierce bought all the flowers from the widow in the mud and asked for her hand. Nathan Pierce died in his sleep on a cold January night in 1935, at the age of 81. Catherine woke to find him beside her, peaceful and still. And though the grief was crushing, there was also a kind of terrible gratitude that he had gone quietly, without pain, after a long and well-lived life. The funeral was enormous, attended by people from all over the state who had known Nathan and respected him. Cowboys he had worked with decades ago, neighbors whose lives he had touched, business associates who had valued his integrity, and family who had loved him deeply all came to pay their respects. Catherine stood at the graveside, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, and watched as they lowered her husband into the red earth he had loved so much. She did not cry, not then. The tears would come later, in private moments when the absence hit her with renewed force. But at the funeral, she was composed and gracious, thanking people for coming, accepting condolences with the same strength she had shown during every hardship of her life. After the funeral, there was the question of what Catherine would do. The children wanted her to move in with one of them, arguing that she should not be alone in the big house. But Catherine refused gently but firmly. This was her home, the place she and Nathan had built together, and she would not leave it while she still drew breath. "I have been alone before," she told them. I survived it then, and I will survive it now. This is where I want to be, surrounded by memories of your father, of the life we built. Let me have that." So they let her stay, though Samuel and his family visited daily, and the other children came as often as they could. Catherine fell into a new rhythm, quieter and lonelier than before, but still purposeful. She tended her garden, received visits from her grandchildren and great-grandchildren who were beginning to arrive, and spent long hours sitting on the porch remembering. She lived for another 3 years, growing gradually frailer, but never losing her sharp mind or her indomitable spirit. When she finally died in the spring of 1938, at the age of 81, it was in the house Nathan had built for her, in the bed they had shared for so many years, surrounded by flowers from her garden. They buried her next to Nathan, and the whole community turned out again to mourn the passing of a woman who had been a symbol of strength and resilience for generations. The widow who had sold flowers in the mud had become a matriarch, a pillar of the community, a woman whose life story was told and retold as an example of courage and the power of second chances. The Running Creek Ranch continued under Samuel's management and eventually passed to his children and grandchildren. The house by the creek stood for generations, a testament to the love that had built it. And every spring, without fail, wildflowers grew around the foundation, columbines and Indian paintbrush and purple asters, as if Catherine's spirit still tended them. The story of Nathan and Catherine Pierce became part of local legend, the tale of the cowboy who bought all the flowers and the widow who dared to love again. Their descendants multiplied and spread throughout Arizona, carrying with them the values of hard work, integrity, and the belief that love could triumph over even the deepest losses. And on quiet evenings, when the sun set over the mountains and painted the sky in impossible colors, people swore they could see 2 figures on the porch of the old Pierce house, sitting together as they had done in life, holding hands and watching the beauty of the world they had helped build. It was just a story, of course, the kind of romantic legend that grows up around people who lived remarkable lives. But it was also true in the way that mattered most. Nathan and Catherine Pierce had loved each other deeply, had built a life together from nothing but hope and determination, and had created a legacy that would last far beyond their earthly years. From a chance encounter in the mud, they had fashioned a romance that was epic, not because it was dramatic or tragic, but because it was real, enduring, and built on the foundation of mutual respect, partnership, and abiding love. Their story was proof that second chances were possible, that love could bloom even in the hardest soil, and that sometimes the best things in life came from being brave enough to say yes when opportunity knocked, even if you were terrified of being hurt again. It was a story that deserved to be told and remembered, a testament to the power of human connection and the resilience of the human heart. And so it was told, generation after generation. The tale of the widow who sold flowers in the mud and the cowboy who bought them all and asked for her hand, and of the beautiful, enduring love they built together in the harsh and lovely landscape of the Arizona frontier.